Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Mitigating Miscommunication presentation. It's part of our Back to Business series that we started for January 2021. I am Rebecca Barr. I am a PR and Communications Manager for the Better Business Bureau, and I'm here in Boise, Idaho. And we have two really cool speakers for you. If you've joined us the past 2 weeks for this presentation series, you already know them, but we have Roseanne Freitas from the Better Business Bureau coming from Hawaii. And then we have Irene from the Small Business Administration, who will also be speaking with you guys today on mitigating miscommunication. So we'll get up here, and we just have a few reminders. If you're new to this platform, this remo.co platform, it's really cool. You might have noticed when you jumped in the event that you were dropped into a table and it asked for you to put your camera and mic on, and that's because it has a really cool networking feature that you'll be able to take advantage of after the presentation. So we'll leave some time when we're done covering the topic. If you want to stay tuned for some networking, you'll be able to do that. Just have your mic and camera on afterwards. But for now, during the presentation, you will not need your microphone or camera on, so that should already be turned off. And then we do have a chat going on. So there is a chat to the right. If you have any questions, there's also a Q&A tab. So if you have a question, you can drop it in the Q&A tab. If you just want to chat with either all the attendees or just the people at your table, you can do that in the chat box. But we are sharing a screen. So if you are not seeing the PowerPoint presentation right now, you might want to close the chat box, and that will make the PowerPoint much larger on your screen. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roseanne, who will kick us off with this presentation on mitigating misinformation or miscommunication.
Thank you, Rebecca, so much. So we're going to get started. Now, we've started a lot of the last two presentations with this slide, and so we're going to continue that trend. And part of it is a lot of what we're talking about here on the webinar series is about the standards of trust of the Better Business Bureau, which can be applied to almost any aspect of business. If you remember on our first one, Irene talked about how it really relates to your brand, that you need to have all of these components involved. And then last week, we really focused in on that safeguard privacy when we talked about cybersecurity. Well, today, we're going to move on and we're going to talk a lot about the be responsive. It's that part of the business transaction that most people don't like, when things go wrong and problems happen. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about being responsive. And how does this happen? How do we have these disputes going? Well, we know it's miscommunication and unfulfilled expectations. Bottom line, something between the business and the consumer broke down in the communication lines, or they just didn't get what they thought they were going to get, which also comes back to that miscommunication. So what are some of the causes of these miscommunications and unfulfilled expectations? Well, sometimes it's word choice. Have you ever read some contracts or some things where it's such big, long words, it takes you like reading one sentence 3 times to grasp what they're trying to say? Well, your contract and your information should not be including those words. You need to make it easy for everybody to read so that they can't miscommunicate or see a word differently or misinterpret it. So think about the word choices that you have in any written documentation, or sloppy speech habits. Now, we know what those are. Those are the acronyms, industry jargon, or buzzwords. I used to work in the construction world. I can assure you there's so much industry jargon going on. And while people in the industry know it, the consumer doesn't. So when you're talking with the consumer, that customer, remove that language. While you may understand it, they don't. And you may have to take a little bit more time to explain that information. Also, unorganized thinking. It happens to all of us, where we have these ideas in our head, but we actually haven't put it down on paper in an organized manner to present it to somebody. And you're rattling off everything, and they're just giving you a blank look. That means they're not understanding your thought process. So when you're explaining a sale of any kind, make sure that has a process that makes sense and flows well. Legalese, we all know that the lawyers do require that in the contracts. However, make sure at least the scope of work, whatever that is in those easy to choose words so that people understand exactly what they're going to get. Don't get caught up in all the legal words that they cannot figure out on their own. Also, do you ask your clients to reiterate what you just said to them? Because a lot of times when you've said it to them and they reiterate it back to you, you're going to catch that maybe they misinterpreted something. And that's because you do this day in, day out. So you understand it all, but they might not. So sometimes, actually I would say most times, it is great to ask them to tell you what you just said and make sure you're both on that same page. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume they know anything about your industry. Your job is to explain it to them in the simplest of terms. So don't assume that they know anything coming into that transaction. And also lack of training. And we're going to talk about that. Irene's going to get into that a little later. And that is you need to train your entire staff on what services and products your company offers. Sometimes an employee might promise them something that you don't do. So you don't want that to happen. Make sure your staff understands exactly what you can and cannot do so that you're not promising something that you can't deliver. So next up is Irene, and she's going to start to talk a little bit about mindset. Irene, take it over.
Thanks so much, Roseanne. So as we continue, we're definitely going to think about first mindset and then skill set. So the mindset is, even though we're going to be in a situation that could be a bit challenging or frustration is also brewing, we definitely need to put ourselves in the right mindset. We definitely don't want to retract words that we said or, oh, shoot, I should have said that differently. So if you have to take that 10 seconds, step back. We always hear the, count to 10, breathe before you speak. And so we definitely want to put those thoughts into motion as well. And so on our next slide, we have a couple items that we should all know, but at the same time, I think we do forget sometimes, but customer service, always in the forefront. And with any consumer, anytime we walk into an establishment, these are the things that we are thinking. We definitely either want to be greeted because we need help finding something, or when we're looking for something, it is always nice to be able to find that person. So depending on the type of business that you have, how do you engage with your customers? Are they needing you to listen to what they have to say? As Roseanne mentioned, all customers are wanting to be valued. Just let them know that you understand what they're saying. You can see what the situation is, and you do understand. So in order to do that, there has to be respect and ultimately exceed their expectation. Because most importantly, once you've attained your customers, you definitely want them to come back. And you want them to refer so you can get more customers, broaden your reach. And the best way to do that is to value the customer. And on the next slide. So just a little bit about dispute resolution options. There's always a better way to handle a situation. So we're just going to touch on a few of those for you. So we're always going to run into unhappy customers, guaranteed. It'd be great if everyone is happy when they came in, but things happen, such as life. And the most important thing is, and I don't know about you, but when I go and look at a new business or I want to read up on them, I definitely go to their website and I'm looking through reviews. I'm always checking out to see what is going on social media. What are people saying? So respond professionally. Let them know that you are there to solve the problem. You can easily say, well, you did something wrong, or maybe that customer didn't do it properly. So it's easy to say what they did, but definitely let them know that here's the instructions, or these were the steps. Maybe there was something that was missed. And then just always let them know that you're here to help. So take away that emotion and the anxiety, because that's easier to jump on, and we always want to protect ourselves, but at the same time, we're going to solve a problem so that we can keep our customers. So we definitely want to make sure that we handle any situation professionally and do it in a way where the customer feels, you know, this was the best way, because I can certainly see how this could have gone wrong. And on the next slide, here's a few examples of apologizing, because foremost, we do need to let our customers know we're sorry. Things happen. I definitely want to fix it. And so make sure that you're asking questions. What do they need? What was wrong? Was there an expectation that wasn't met? You can easily explain the company's position. So you can easily say, these are our steps. This is our policy. I'm willing to make an exception. So you definitely want to be sincere and let the customer know that you are definitely understanding, and let them know that you apologize for any inconvenience, or maybe they were disappointed in that expectation. And if the company is at fault, certainly admit it quickly and then correct the error, because again, things happen. I mean, I easily send stuff out and I didn't have the right date. So I'm definitely glad when people let me know, it's because I could definitely fix it really quick and then make that correction. And if the customer is at fault, allow him to save face, which is easily done by, once you've explained the situation, maybe the steps, I'm sure the customer can say, oh my gosh, I see where I misspoke, or oh, I see where I didn't follow the right steps. You know, thank you for pointing that out to me. It makes it a whole lot easier to take care of that situation so it can be solved, because ultimately the goal is for the customer to return, and they're going to return when they have an exceptional experience or a comfortable experience, because it is all about making the customer happy, right? To the best of our ability. And so to reassure that, we do need to eliminate that fear. And that fear is letting them know, I am sure we can fix this for you. We'll do all we can. Let me go talk to my supervisor. Let me come out there and see if I can either provide a discount. Maybe I can explain so that we can make sure that this situation doesn't happen again. But always reassure, take away that fear, because we all understand things happen. So definitely let them know, but attain all the facts and make sure that you're both on the same page. Make sure that you're both talking about the same situation, and ask those questions so that you can make sure that you're listening, and let the customer finish, because we don't want to interrupt, because they are there to express themselves. So we definitely don't want to argue, and let's just wait till they're done. That way everyone has a chance to talk, and you may need to restate your understanding of the issue or the situation. And most importantly, let the customer know that you understand their point of view. Now, your business, and we've been talking about this throughout our presentations, is customers will do business with people that they trust. So your brand is your reputation. Those reviews are your reputation. So we definitely want to make sure that if you need to rebuild it, or you need to support it, and you're standing by it. So you may need to apologize for any misunderstandings, and also remind them that you have built a good reputation based on the service and dedication to the customer. And by doing that, you're here to listen and have that conversation. So show your appreciation for their patronage and connect with them on those issues. Have conversations, because we are here to build relationships. And ultimately, thank the customers. We do want to feel appreciated and valued. Now, there's always good ways for constructive criticism, because we definitely want to make sure that what we say is going to come out right. And maybe you put a script together that has these, what if this happens? How am I going to address it? Have some pre-canned conversations, even with yourself or your team, to make sure that everyone is all on the same page and they know to handle different situations. But ultimately, you need to let your customers know that you value their business and you look forward to seeing them at their next visit. And of course, we always want to approach and receive that sincerity, and always smile. That's your welcome. That's your hello. And it's even your goodbye. Let them know, can't wait to see you next time. And then just emphasizing, listen and learn. Listening is key for effective customer service and avoiding communication. So even take those few seconds to make sure that you hear what is on the mind of your customer, because ultimately they may have something else going on and not have the full picture. So we definitely want to make sure that we hear them out. And everyday customer interaction, and this can be passed down through through your whole team, because this has to be addressed through the person who answers the phone, greets people at the front door. So show that you are listening to your customers. Take some notes if you feel like you need to make sure that you're writing things down, because a lot of times if I'm the customer on the other side and I see that you're attentive, you're making notes, I was like, oh, okay, then they're really listening to me. Listen to their tone, and also watch the body language, because at the same time, this person could be crossing their arms, they could be shaking their head, they could be just hands on hip. So you can tell that they're defensive, and it's easy to just tone them down, talk them through it, so that both feel much more comfortable by providing that clear and concise communication. And then clarify questions before you provide a response. And again, you might need to take that extra 3 seconds just to talk them through it. And then always follow up with a confirmation that the resolution that you're looking for is for customer satisfaction. So definitely walk through those steps. And at the end of the day, don't we all want to be treated just as we want to treat someone else? So think about, if you were going to a business and the situation happened, you would like it to have a good outcome. So treat customers as you would like to be treated yourself. And then have that same conversation with your team and your staff. And you may have to have your filter on and put yourself in their shoes, because we never know what is happening on the other end, which is why it's very important to listen and just take a few extra minutes. And actually, if you haven't tried role playing with your staff, this is a great training opportunity. If you guys have, maybe you do quarterly team building, this is a great opportunity. Maybe you act out a few scenarios that involve both easygoing and difficult customers. And then you have your team play them out. Observe from a manager's perspective how they handle the situation and coach them on areas to improve. Even have your team step in and say, well, what would you do? Or if you were in this situation, is there a different way that it could be handled? Or could we see some different steps that the business might take in order to have a good conversation? So definitely take some role-playing opportunities.
Thanks, Irene. And I think Irene really touched on some really good points there. It's really trying to be empathetic with the customer and trying to keep the situation calm. And the ideas that Irene just went over, a lot of that will mitigate a lot of your miscommunication issues. So right there, you as the owner, you actually control that situation. We all know things aren't perfect 100% of the time. Things go wrong. And the true test of any business is how it responds to that. And that's where you actually have this opportunity to capture and show the integrity of your business. However, sometimes it doesn't work, and we all know that. So we're going to talk about some other options in case that discussion you have doesn't work. So the first one up is going to be conciliation. You may or may not be familiar with that term. However, we're going to talk a little bit about it. It's another alternative dispute resolution tool. So what it is an independent third party helps facilitate that discussion with those two parties. That person is just there to facilitate it. They're not part of the conversation. They're just helping with that back and forth. Usually this process is done in writing, because you don't want really people shouting, right? You want them to write, give them time to read and process and comprehend. Each party gets to state their position, but also they get to state what solution they want. It's ultimately the goal is a solution. It's not just an opportunity to complain back and forth. It's a solution. It's that resolution. This process is non-binding, and probably the conciliation you might know best is what we do at the Better Business Bureau in our complaint process. So if you've ever been in one of those, whether as the business or the consumer, that back and forth interaction, that's conciliation. Now, a little later in the end of this presentation, we're going to talk about our complaint process because we do get a lot of questions on it. So we'll tell you a little bit more, but let's continue on. If this conciliation doesn't work, this independent back and forth person who's helping mitigate doesn't help, there is still another option to resolve the dispute. And that is a mediation. And a lot of times we've all heard that term. So what does that mean? So mediation involves a trained mediator, someone who is trained to help facilitate, again, these conversations. This person meets with the parties and guides them to an agreeable solution, if possible. The mediator clarifies the issues and encourages that discussion. But that mediator's not the judge here. They're not a referee. They're not going to make that decision. Their goal is to help get those people to a decision that they're both comfortable with. It is confidential. It's voluntary. You don't have to do it. Now, you'll see on that last note there, it says both parties agreed to make a good faith effort to resolve the issue. I think that's something you need to have in your arsenal from every aspect of dispute resolution. Well, actually, even in your business model, you should always have a good faith effort in everything you do with the consumer. So mediation, a lot of times we know that's an option, but how do we get there? We're going to talk a little bit about mediation and the Better Business Bureau once we get to our complaint process. But that's what mediation is someone who is trained to help negotiate. And sometimes that doesn't work. Then we go to the next step of arbitration. So now arbitration, a little more serious, it does involve a professional arbitrator, and this person is going to investigate the legal rights and wrongs, and they're going to make a decision. So you're leaving that up to another person. Now, we have two different types of arbitration. One is binding, which kind of is what it sounds like. It's a binding agreement between the two parties. This arbitrator is going to listen, arbitrator is going to make a decision, and both parties are going to honor that. And that's what they agree to when they go into that binding arbitration. Now, sometimes you'll have a conditional arbitration that's conditionally binding. So what that means, that's actually in the consumer's favor. And it requires the consumer to agree to the solution. If the consumer does not, it's not binding. So for example, some of you may have heard of the BBB Auto Line. It is the largest dispute resolution program in the United States. A lot of your manufacturers sign up for it. If there's a problem with a vehicle, they come to this arbitration. Again, if the consumer doesn't agree, it's not binding. However, it is binding on that manufacturer. So for the BBB Auto Line, it resolves issues like the lemon laws, warranties, class action, and dealer manufacturing issues. So that is one type of arbitration. So we talked a little bit about the discussion between the business and the consumer and the customer. We talked a bit about the conciliation options here at the BBB, mediation, and arbitration. Normally in that, you will come up with a resolution because the next step after arbitration is litigation. And I think anybody in business who has ever had to go to court will tell you that is just a no-win situation for anyone. It is very costly. It takes time. It takes a lot of energy. So while we know that big corporations do it, it is much harder for a small business to survive litigation. So having processes in place and a plan to handle miscommunication is key for any small business. So in that, we get to this BBB complaint process. Now, if I ask some of you in the room, what is the BBB about? I probably will get various answers. And some people I will hear, oh, you guys are the complaint people. I'll get, you guys are the scam tracker people. I'll get various things. Ultimately, what we're about trust in the marketplace between business and consumer. Complaints come into that, but that's not our goal. Ultimately, our goal is to find a resolution and to encourage trust for businesses. However, if you're a business here today and you've been on that end of it, it's a little intimidating and a little scary to get that notification from the Better Business Bureau that they've received a complaint. So what happens and what does it mean? So you get that notification, you feel like, oh no, somebody's coming after me. What you have to know is somebody has complained. Now, nobody's making a judgment call at this point. They're just saying, you have a customer who's complained. Here is their issue. Now we want to hear your response. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, there's two sides to every story. And that's what this complaint process is for us at BBB. We want to hear from the consumer. We want to hear from the business and see, once they start talking to each other, if we can come up with some sort of resolution that makes both parties happy. At BBB, we are not taking sides. We're not, and it depends who you are. I've heard businesses say we take consumers' side, and I've heard consumers say we take businesses' side. We don't take anybody's side. We are an independent third party. We do believe in that, and we do honor that. So our job is to help facilitate so that these two people can have a conversation. So first and foremost, that is what that complaint is. It doesn't mean, it's not like, you know, you're going to jail, don't pass go, don't collect $200. No, that's not what it means. It means you need at this point to address the situation. Sometimes the consumer does go to the business first, and sometimes they don't. But that's what that is. It's an look at this as an opportunity to address the situation. So if you get that, what should you include in that response? First of all, we want to know what you think. What happened from your side of it? You need to put that down on paper. And remember, this all needs to be in writing. Also, list what solution you have. What are you offering this customer or not? Remember, it's not about you giving away the whole house. This is about you trying to come to a fair resolution with this consumer. And if you've already resolved the issue, please include that information. Don't ignore the information coming from the BBB. Remember, it's an opportunity to address the consumer's issues and to try to stop it from escalating any further. But you also need to remember is this is read, this is posted on our website if we've determined there's an issue and it can be posted. We do remove names. Obviously, you don't want to put people's names or contact information. However, what this allows, it allows your potential customer to review the complaint process. It's really easy these days to go online and read everything a company has done wrong. without that company having an opportunity to respond. However, our process of conciliation, you get to see the consumer's original complaint, you get to see the business's response. You get to see any dialogue back and forth. That is really going to tell you a whole lot more about the business and the integrity of that business by how they respond to a complaint. So you need to remember that, because people are smart. People can read and they can tell back and forth what is really happening in that transaction. But here's two questions you really need to ask yourself, not just when you get a complaint, but at all times. Did your company act in good faith? And address, especially with a complaint, address the issue. Remember, good faith is really important. Are you putting that customer first? And did you do your best to resolve that issue? And then, did your company do everything you could have been reasonably been expected to? And that's the thing, it has to be reasonable. You just, sometimes people want the world, but it needs to be reasonable within the context of that transaction. So put that in your head when you answer those questions about what happened and when you deal with conflict. So what happens when you've responded and it comes back to us at the Better Business Bureau? What happens? Well, there's a couple of things that can go on. If the customer accepts the response that you have given and is happy with the solution, the case is closed, and on it, it will note that it was a resolved case. And that's awesome because it shows the process works. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And if the customer declines the response, then we get a couple of different things going on. First of all, we do have specialists who deal with this. And what they'll do is they will look at both parties, the consumers as well as the business's response, and they'll determine if there needs to be additional information coming back from the business. And if that is the case, they'll reach back out to the business to clarify some more issues. But if not, and the consumer is still not willing to resolve it, then the case will be closed as answered. So what it shows is it shows that the business responded. Maybe the consumer didn't accept the solution, but the business was responsive, and that's really important. Okay, here's the one. What happens if I fail to respond or address the issue? This is the one road you do not want to go down with the Better Business Bureau. Why? Because remember, in our 8 standards, it's be responsive. So ignoring consumer issues is not being responsive, not showing that you are a trustworthy business. So what can happen? Well, it will be noted on your company's BBB profile that you did not respond to a complaint. It can impact your BBB rating. And for those of you in our audience today that are accredited businesses, we hold you guys at a much higher standard, and it can jeopardize your accreditation status. And you could go before a review board for suspension or revocation of your accreditation. So whether you are an accredited business or whether you're not, put the consumer first and answer. We're not coming out to hang anybody, right? We just want to come up to show that the business is responding and they are trying to work to some sort of agreeable solution. So this one here, there's a timeline of this. And when this presentation's done, we will be sending out a follow-up link with the PowerPoint slides, but also we do have a really great collateral material that has a lot of this BBB process. So we'll include that, and it has this timeline. So it's not like you get the notification and you immediately have to respond right then and there. We do have a process, and you'll see on that, it can go, we try to process it within 2 days. Obviously, if it's a holiday or weekend, that may play a role there. Then we send it back out. The business does have time to respond. And if they don't respond, we do reach out again, whether it's via another letter or even a phone call. Then once they've responded, there is a process where then the response goes back to the consumer. The consumer has an opportunity to respond. Sometimes the consumer doesn't respond. And it is also noted on the BBB profile if the consumer doesn't respond. If the consumer responds and there's still outstanding issues, then it goes back to the business. So then you can have this back and forth. And the goal here at the end of the day is to come up with a resolution for all parties. So a little bit about what that means. Now, here's kind of a really cool note for you guys. At the BBB, we do offer, in addition to the conciliation, we have the ability with mediation and arbitration options. If you are an accredited business and you meet all of the standards, those high standards that we have, that's a free service to you. So if you're sitting there in the audience and wondering, and you want to know a little bit more, we're going to ask you to reach out to your business engagement person, and they can walk you through it. They can tell you about these options. Because obviously, if you want to have your customers go to mediation or arbitration, you need to put that in a contract. And so you'll need the correct language for that. So let us know. We can also send that information to anyone. If you're not accredited and you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, you can also reach out to us, and we can tell you other wonderful benefits of accreditation. So here we come back to those standards of trust, but you'll see they're laid out a little bit different. And I first of all want to thank Sam Fife for this, who is one of our resolutions or former resolutions people at BBB. He is now in our innovation department, but he's amazing. And Sam really pointed this out. He talked about, as a business, you want to set the expectation. And how do we do that? Well, we advertise honestly. Make sure whatever you're putting out for consumers is real. You're not misleading them in any way. You don't have little fine print that they can't see, that you are being as forthright and honest as you can with them. And always be transparent in all of your transactions. For some of you, you may sell, say, a water flask. It's a little easier of a transaction. But for companies where it's a lot more intricate involved as construction, these are really also very important to help mitigate any issues. So once we've set that expectation, we've got to meet it as a company. And that means we got to honor the promises we made to the consumer. We have to tell the truth. Sometimes that's really uncomfortable, but you're going to go a long way for establishing trust. You need to always safeguard their information. We talked a lot about that in that cybersecurity, making sure their personal identity isn't stolen. And you always need to embody integrity in everything you do. So now if you have if you want to resolve unmet expectations, what can you do? Well, you got to build that trust again. And part of that is being responsive, which is what today's presentation has been about. It has been about answering and responding to the consumer. Best way is always make sure the consumer understands up front. However, if they don't, make sure you're trying to meet with them, keep all of your emotions out of it, and do what you can. However, if that doesn't work, you do have somebody helping you out and can help the consumer out to help resolve the issue. So at this point, I'm going to turn this one back over to our MC, Rebecca Barr, to close it out. Hey, Rebecca.
Hello, thank you, ladies. That was another great presentation, and I think we all learned something. And the big key thing that came out to me is just communication, be as clear and simple as possible, no matter how ugly these conflicts can get, right? And if anybody wants additional information, if you want to contact one of our speakers, we have Roseanne and Irene's contact information up here. We'll also be sending out the slides and some of that follow-up information that Roseanne spoke about in an email. So be on the lookout for that. But if you want to contact them directly, here is their contact information. And then we also have a few resources online. So we have the SBA website. You can go to sba.gov, and then they have state-specific websites to find the representative or information for your state. You can go there. And then the BBB has a dedicated site for businesses. It's full of resources and information for businesses, and that is trust-bbb.org. You can find all kinds of information as well as the link to our next presentation. And that's going to be our big grand finale, the 4th installment of this Back to Business series. It's next Wednesday, same time, same place. You can register for that either through the emails that we'll send out, or when we get out of this presentation and we go back into the Remo floor plan, you'll see this exact picture up in the top right-hand corner, and that will link to the registration page. And so we'll be going over the power of pivoting. And I think we all learned from last year that you can't really sit still when things are uncertain, and you really have to learn to adapt and innovate and learn to be agile. And so we're going to go over all of that next week with Roseanne and Irene as well. So if you haven't registered for that, register for it now. But when we close this presentation, I want to remind you that we'll have a little bit of networking time, which is really cool in this platform. We're going to close the presentation and open up the floor, and you can double click to each of the tables in order to jump from table to table, have your mic on, have your camera on, and we'll be able to mix and mingle. Irene, Roseanne, and myself will also be there if you have any questions for us. And thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to share this information, and we'll see you next week.